I'm kind of curious, what is the dumbest thing an American has ever said to you?
I love this one because I have a few. There's been like 5 times I want to say total that when they ask me, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Spain. The answer is, oh, like we're in Mexico. Or Spain, like Colombia, like Latin America. And I'm like, no, Spain, in Europe, across the Atlantic Ocean, you know?
For context, I'm German, but I grew up in Switzerland and I spent 2 years living in New York with my family. So one day before English class, I was sitting with a bunch of my American friends and we were talking about the last Hunger Games movie that we had just seen in the theater the weekend before. Our teacher overheard our conversation and he looks at me and he's like, "Wow, Sarah, was this your first time in a movie theater?" With obvious confusion, I asked, "What?" And my teacher proceeds to ask the question, "Well, do you have movie theaters in Switzerland?" And for whatever reason, the very first thing that came to my mind was, no, when we want to have fun, we go outside and dance around a tree. And then my teacher just stared at me like... Unfortunately, I then had to elaborate that yes, we do have theaters in Switzerland, and no, this had not been my first time.
When I moved from Brazil to the US, I had a teacher. I was about 10 when I moved here. I had a teacher in school ask me from the entire class if I had a pet anaconda or a monkey. And when I told her no, that I never seen either of them and like around, she asked how, because the entire Brazil is the Amazon forest. And I proceeded to tell her it isn't. We have cities just like any other country. We're normal, just like any other country. The Amazon is a part of it, not the whole country. She proceeded to tell me I was wrong, that I didn't know my own country, my own culture, that, I lived there for 10 years. She never stepped a foot in there, but she knew more about the country that I lived than I did, so.
So when I was about 13 years old, my family and I went to Arkansas in the US to live for an entire year. I obviously had to go to this new school and meet new people and have other teachers and all of that. So I went to the school and had this history class. I got to the classroom and I told the teacher, well, hi, I'm Natalia, I'm the new kid. What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. He said, oh, that's right, you're the new student. Where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Colombia in South America. And he was so surprised, like I will never forget his face. And he said, oh, really? I didn't know that people in South America could have like natural blonde hair or green eyes or even white skin. I was like, wow, seriously? I cannot believe.
So when I was in Savannah, Georgia in 2015, I met a guy in a bar from Cleveland, Ohio. And after a short conversation, he asked me where I was from. So I said, oh, I'm Welsh, but I live in London, England, UK. And he was like, oh, wow, your English is really good for someone that isn't American. No, sorry. I live in England. My first language, English. He was like, yeah, I know where England is, but your English is fantastic. How did you learn it so well? I'm like, well, in England, they speak English. That's kind of where the word English comes from.
For a little bit of context, I go to school in London, England, in the United Kingdom. In the summer, going up into my first year of college, I had to explain to 4 separate people that I, in fact, am not fluent in French, and that, in fact, in England, they speak English, right? It gets worse. In one of these occasions, I was told that I was stupid because America was the only English-speaking country. I then had to proceed to saying, no, these countries all say. I go, Canada, Belize, Australia, England, Scotland, Ireland, and I said New Zealand. And this person goes, well, of course they speak English in New Zealand. We live there. Honey, we live in New England. Massachusetts! I can't.
So outside of the basic stereotypes, like do I wrestle crocs or ride kangaroos, here's one of mine. I went to college in the heart of the Midwest, not a place super common for Aussies to be. So at a party, I had someone come up to me and say, hey man, what language do you speak in Australia? And I just looked at him like,
what's wrong with you, buddy? What?
Like, you're not realizing we're speaking the same, communicating here, but evidently he was pretty serious. And as an Aussie, in situations like these, you realize you have the chance to be a smart ass. As I did. I told him, yeah, you know, we have 4 different dialects in Australia of broken English. To be honest, English isn't really a strong suit for us, so it's hard to communicate here. He walked off, maybe confused, but probably satisfied.
I'm Irish, and I've had more than one American tell me that my English is really good for an Irish person.
Super funny story. Glad you asked. I moved from Georgia to South Carolina, and so I had to change my driver's license. I brought all my documents, my birth certificate, prior ID, mail, lease agreement, everything. And so this lady calls me up to the counter, and you know, like, they're semi-nice, not like really happy to be there. And mind you, I've moved like 50 times, so I knew like what documents I needed. Disclaimer, I was born in Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii. So I hand this lady everything she needs, including the birth certificate from Hawaii. She proceeds to tell me I'm not a US citizen and that she can't give me a driver's license. So we argue back and forth until she goes and asks somebody. She came back with the worst attitude, hated me. I'm like, ma'am, how did you get this job? And where did you go to school?
So me and my wife are attending this wedding in Texas. We're from Mexico. And one of the groom's friends brings his girlfriend, who starts our conversation saying, oh, I'm an NYU grad. I'm so proud about that, this and that, whatnot. And then she looks at my wife and asks her, what's the difference between Mexico and New Mexico? We were like speechless. My wife was kind enough to say, well, Mexico is a country and New Mexico is a state that belongs to the United States. That seemed like a pretty big idea to grasp her head around, and she couldn't understand the difference between them.
Okay, one more. So me and my godmother is out on the streets in New York, and you know, it's a lovely day, but we're just taking a break, you know. And obviously we start speaking Swedish. So I ask her, "Kan jag få ett tuggummi? Det ligger i ett fack." And this lady just pauses beside us like, "What did you say?" And I just froze. I thought I'd, you know, like offended her in some way, and I just froze like, excuse me, ma'am? You said fuck to your mother. So I'm just like, no, we're speaking Swedish. And also my godmother's like, no, we're speaking in another language. So this lady, fully composed, stone-faced, looks into my eyes and says, in the US, we only speak American.
It was several years ago. I worked at a fast food chain in Quebec, Canada. And since Quebec speaks mainly French, I start by serving those two customers by saying, Bonjour, comment puis-je vous aider? Then they look at each other and one of them says, I'm sorry, but we speak American. American, eh? That's strange because it sounds exactly like Canadian in English.
So I'm from New Mexico, and everybody always tells me whenever I tell them that I'm from New Mexico, they're like, wow, oh my gosh, what's Mexico like? Like, aren't you so happy to be in America? Like, you speak such good English. Meanwhile, I'm Native American. I've always been here. My family's always been here. Like, I'm just so confused. Like, we're a state. And then when I tell people that I'm Native American, they're like, wow, I thought you guys were extinct. Like, no. What? Like, I'm just confused. We all had to take US history. Like, it was an attempted genocide. That's, yeah. Just love the ignorance. It really makes me feel like I'm at home.
It is really sad to say I have a lot of these, but I think the worst one was when we were in New York hanging out, and one of the girls that was hanging out with us was from Ohio, and she actually started saying that the best thing that could have happened to the US was that Trump won. Mind you, this is 2016, because now all the immigrants would leave. And then she started saying that all Latin American people were rapists and were supposed to be maids, like hotel maids, homemaids, and that the only thing that Latinos knew how to do was cleaning. Of course, her boyfriend from New York was like, because I was there. And of course, that was super stupid. And then she goes like, oh my God, Gabby, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people that lives in those neighborhoods, eats tacos every day, and are like not white like you. They're probably European.
Okay, so they've asked me if we're the capital of Dominican Republic. They've asked me why do we get bothered when we're called Mexicans if we're all Hispanics. They've asked me if we're located in the small islands from Spain. They've even asked me if we have Walmarts in Puerto Rico and if we have movie theaters. I just love it. I personally think my favorite one is the Mexican one. Actually, no. Thinking that we're the capital city of Dominican Republic. That's my favorite one. Oh, I almost forgot. They're like, wait, you're Puerto Rican. How's your English so good? And last but not least, you don't need a passport to enter the States?
Okay, so I have a lot of these. So I'm from South Africa, and the typical thing that an American will say to me when they find out is, like, but you're white. And I'll say, yeah, I'm white. And then they'll ask, but are your parents also white? And I'll say, yes, my parents are also white. And then they'll ask, okay, do you speak African? And I'll say, no, there are multiple languages in Africa, but I speak Afrikaans, which is a language that comes from Dutch because of the Dutch settlers that settled in South Africa. And then they'll say, oh, so you're actually Dutch, right? No. No, I'm not. I'm South African.
To this day, I still can't believe this happened. A few years ago, my school in Mexico had a Zoom call with another school in the United States. At the end of the call, we had a Q&A section so we could learn more about each other's culture. This American girl stood up and said the following to my entire school. I know that everyone in Mexico lives in adobe houses, but do you also ride your own donkey to school? She was dead serious. She was dead serious.
I moved from Washington, D.C. back home to Washington. I needed to get a new license. I went to the DMV and handed the lady my license from the District of Columbia. She said, oh, we can't accept foreign licenses. I then explained to her it was the fucking capital of the United States of America. She didn't believe me and thought that, oh, people don't actually live there and have licenses. I then got into an argument with the manager of the DMV, who then had to call his supervisor. Needless to say, I got my new license and a bunch of people felt real fucking stupid after that.
Oh boy. Keep in mind, I'm German and my boyfriend's an American, so yeah, I wouldn't hate on Americans. I don't want to generalize, but some of these are too funny not to share, and I've heard these by at least 3 people, so here it goes. Do you guys have McDonald's? Yeah, Austria and Australia are the same thing, right? So I asked, do you know where Australia is? And they said, yeah, next to the UK. Do you guys have vegans and vegetarians in Germany? Do you guys eat fruit? Do you guys use public transportation? You don't celebrate Thanksgiving? What do you mean you don't celebrate 4th of July?
Okay, so this is one that my siblings and I get all the time. If you're Mexican, then why are your eyes green? Then I tell them, oh, because my dad has blue eyes and my mom has brown eyes. Oh, so your dad is American? No, my dad is Mexican. Oh, so your mom is American? No, they're both Mexican. We're 100% Mexican. We were born in Mexico. We are Mexican with green eyes. And they're real. And we're tall. Also, we get that a lot too. It's kind of sad.
So, I was in the middle of Spain on the Camino in 2014, and we met an American woman, and we was just talking about school and education, and languages came up, and I was like, oh, what languages do you speak? And she was like, oh, I speak Spanish and French and, well, obviously American. And I was like, no, you speak in English. It's English. And she's like, no, it's American. And I was like, no, that's your dialect. But the language you are speaking is English. And all she did was argue, no, it's American. And I was like, that's the dialect. And she wasn't grasping it, bless her. But the frustration is real.
Here we go. We're on a cruise ship. I told the guests that I'm from Amsterdam. Actually, I'm not from Amsterdam, small village about an hour away, but they won't know, this story proves it. So, a guest comes up to me and says, oh, you're from Amsterdam. I absolutely love it. I've been. I think it's great. Actually, what's the name of the capital again? So I go, actually, Amsterdam is the capital. The name of the country is the Netherlands. And the guest goes, no, I've been to Amsterdam, but I've never been to the Netherlands. I think you're confused. I'm trying to help here. I go like, well, it's also referred to as Holland. Some people say that. Maybe you call it Holland. Is that it? No. Never been to Holland and the Netherlands. I know where that is. I've only been to Amsterdam. Definitely not that. I think you're wrong.
Canadian here. Right after I moved to America, I went to the Social Security office so that I could apply for a Social Security number so that I could work in America. I went up to the little kiosk and I punched in that I was applying for my very first Social Security number. And the man who was working there said, excuse me, ma'am, you're going to want to punch in that you're applying for a replacement card, not a new number. And I said, no, sir, I don't have a Social Security number. I am applying for the first time. And he said, and you're an American? And I said, no, sir, I actually just moved here from Canada just a couple of weeks ago. And he said this. Ma'am, I have to say, your English is amazing. Yeah.
So I am Canadian from Toronto, and a few years ago I was visiting Washington. In one of the museums, I started talking to this group of girls who were visiting, but they were American. So one of them asks me, where are you from? And I told her, I'm from Toronto. She said, where's that? In Ohio? I was like, no, Toronto, I'm Canadian, from Canada. And she says, oh, you're European. Yeah, from Toronto, Canada, Europe. That's where I'm from. Hi, baby. Are you also surprised?
I saw another video that had the same answer as this, but it happened to me, so I'm gonna let you know. I am from Jamaica. I got here in 2018, early 2019. And I worked at Trader Joe's, so I'd interact with a lot of white people. A lot of people were always like, oh my God, how's your English so good? And I'd have to explain to them that we speak English in Jamaica. But I forgave them because it is Latin America and they probably think we all speak Spanish. But I remember one time this old lady that was always friendly with me, always used to cash out at my register. One day she said to me how we got around in Jamaica, and I was genuinely confused. Like, what do you mean, how do we get around? She's like, if we use cows and donkeys. Oh my God. And I was like, no, we drive cars. And she goes, there are roads there? And I go, yeah, like paved streets. And she goes, oh my God.
Here's the dumbest shit Americans have ever said to me, part 3. Anyway, so this happened on my very first day of high school. I was new, so one of my teachers asked me to introduce myself. I get up, I talk a little bit about myself, and I say that I'm from Switzerland. And there's this guy in the front row, and he looks at me and he's like, Switzerland, where is that? So I answer, it's in Europe. So he's like, oh, so it's a city. And I looked at him and I'm like, no, it's a country in Europe. As to where this boy's face goes, I thought Europe was a country.
So, we went to the zoo a few months ago, and we're looking at those kangaroos, and I say something to my daughter along the lines of, oh, look at these kangaroos. And this lady behind me corrects me and says like, oh no, those are wallabies, which they weren't, they were kangaroos. I know the difference. Anyway, I'm not correcting her. We move on, and eventually she hears me talk to my family, and she's like, so where's your accent from? And I told her from Austria, and she's like, oh, you should have known then that those are not kangaroos.
While I was in Belgrade with a friend over there, we were walking around and we said a few sentences in English. So a guy stopped us to ask us a few questions. We're like, sure, no problem. What do you have to ask? He goes, oh, I'm here from America. I'm doing a layover here. And I just wanted to wonder, how come everyone is speaking Russian and we're in the Middle East? We're like, no, you're in Serbia. We're speaking Serbian. And he goes, no, y'all are speaking Russian and we're in Syria. I think you got your countries mixed up. We tried to explain to him again that, you know, he's in Serbia, in Eastern Europe. And he goes, no, y'all are crazy. Y'all don't even know what country y'all are in. And he walked away and we were just standing there all stunned. Didn't know how he booked his plane ticket thinking he was in Syria all of a sudden. Dumb Things Americans Have Said to Me, Part 2. So back in 2003, a bunch of us went to San Diego, California. While on the beach there, I met a bunch of guys who were in the Marines at the time. And they were actually pretty cute, so we're flirting, everything's going great, and they ask us where we're from. So we say, you know, we're from the Balkans originally, before we moved to Canada. And they're like, oh, where's the Balkans? And we're like, oh, it's in Eastern Europe. You know, it's Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia, Macedonia, Slovenia. And they go, oh, no, those places don't exist. We're like, yes, they do. That's where we're from. And he goes, no, that's just only in the movies. We just told him to look on a map and walked away. Dumb Things Americans Have Said to Me, Part 3. So back in 2008, my friend and I, just before we went on our trip to Paris, we ended up going to a beautiful country in northern Africa called Tunisia to visit her brother. While we were there, of course, we took a lot of pictures. There's people in the background walking around. Everything's great. Come back home, put up pictures on Facebook, and lo and behold, I have an American who I met while I was on one of my trips there go to me, I thought you said you went to Africa. And I said, yes, I did. I went to Tunisia. It's in Africa. And they go, no, you didn't. There are no black people in your picture. You went to the Middle East. And I said, no, I went to Africa. Tunisia is in northern Africa. I had to give them a full geography lesson and history on the continent of Africa and to explain to them that not everyone who is from Africa is dark-skinned.